Hey everybody, welcome back. This is Doug from SoCal Malifaux, or Aesop from the Weird Forums, with part 2 of my series, How to Vassalfaux. In this section, I will be talking about the crew, the deck, schemes, and strats. So we're going to pick up from where we left off in part 1. We're going to assume that you've already either created a game or joined one, and we're going to talk about prepping your deck, and then flipping for deployment, strategies, and schemes. Okay, so here we are in the game that I loaded up. If you remember from part 1, it was called Awesome New Game. The first thing I'm going to do is pull up my deck. Now there's two decks up at the top, the one red deck and the blue deck. The red deck is for player 1, the blue deck is for player 2. You're going to want to open the one that is associated with whichever player you chose to be when you joined the game. The first thing I do is I zoom my deck out a little bit so that I can see everything that's going on in my hand, and then I usually, in the game, pull down the opponent's deck as well to see what they're flipping, make sure no shenanigans are going on. Up at the top of the deck, there's 4 buttons that let you flip 1, 2, 3, or 4 cards. I'm going to go ahead and flip 4 cards right here. You'll see the first time you flip, the cards are in order, so the deck has yet to be shuffled. So the first thing you need to do to prep your deck is flip a couple cards, discard it to your discard pile, and then click the reshuffle button to be ready to go. Then when you flip cards, you can see how I'm flipping, and they're no longer in numerical red joker, black joker order. So you see these are just random cards being flipped off my deck. So to flip for deployment, that's the first thing that I want to flip for. I'm going to go ahead and flip 1 card. I flipped the 8 of Tome. So I'm going to go over here to my main game area, and at the top you'll see there's buttons that illustrate the different deployment areas. The very leftmost is standard deployment. You can click the button and see both the vertical and horizontal, or the 2 different ways that you can deploy each of them. So there's corner, here's flank, and finally there's close deployment, and the 2 ways that you can deploy that. So like I said earlier, I flipped an 8 of Tomes for this one. That's going to be corner deployment. I'm going to go ahead and pop that deployment up here. We'll probably deploy this way. And I just want to point out, Ratty added a helpful aid here. That lighter colored ring helps you identify for specific schemes, such as breakthrough, protect territory, anything that requires you to be within or outside of 6 inches of a deployment zone. Just a helpful little aid Ratty threw in there for us. So let's go ahead and flip our strategy. Strategy for this one's going to be also Tomes. This time I flipped an Ace of Tome. And I'll go ahead and discard and shuffle that back into the deck so that it's also possibly there when I flip schemes. So the 2 cards I'm flipping for schemes here are 4 of Tomes and 7 of Rams. So now that we've flipped strategy and schemes, let's show you where to pull them down so you can reference them later in the game. So here we are back in the game, and if you look at the top bar with the buttons, you'll see the Objects button. Go ahead and click on that, and it's going to pull down a menu, and this is where you'll pretty much grab everything that you need for your game. From your models to, if you wanted to build your own map, you'd get terrain here. Various counters like scrap and corpse. Sometimes the menu will be hidden a little bit to the right. You just have to expand it so you can actually read the different options within there. There's templates in here for like blast, things like blast, firewall, ice pillars. We've got tokens. Tokens are just little extra reference things, but what we're really looking for here is the strats and schemes. So click on the strats and schemes, and again my sidebar is hidden, so I'm going to expand it. And if you remember, we flipped Tomes, Ace of Tomes. So I'm going to go ahead and pick the Tome trigger. They're nicely identified there for us. I'm going to go ahead and click and drag the Tome down into my play area. And then I'll pull up the Schemes menu. And if I remember correctly, my schemes were, oh good, I left them in my discard pile. My schemes were the 4 of Tomes and the 7 of Rams. So let's pull this menu out again so we can see it. Line in the Sand is always available. Go ahead and pull that one down. 4 is going to be Entourage. So I'll click the 4 and drag the 4 down. The 7 is Make Them Suffer. I'm going to go ahead and drag that one down. Then I've got Rams for Bodyguard. And finally, the Tome for Protect Territory. Drag that Tome down there. And now I've pulled down all the scheme chits along with the strategy chit for this game. I close the objects window and just shrink the little text bar dialog box thing at the top. And move my cards out of the way so that I can see everything that's going on here, and I think I'm good to go. So up here at the top there's another button. It looks like a soda can, like a bird's eye view of a soda can. There's one for red and one for blue. Since I'm player 1 in this game, the red one is available. That will open up your sidebar. Now this basically gives you a little space to work with, drop models, schemes, that sort of thing, without your opponent seeing what you're doing. I'm going to copy these chits with a Control-C, and then once they're copied, the chits happen to fall right on top of each other, so it doesn't look like they were copied, but they are. I'm going to drag them over and put them in my sidebar. So this will give me the chance to kind of screw around with them, pick which ones I want to do, without my opponent knowing exactly what I'm doing, because I just made a copy of the 5 available. The next step is going to be hiring your crew. So let's show you how to do that. Again, you find your crew in a similar place that you find the scheme and strategy chits. You might remember from earlier, it's in the objects menu. So I'm going to go ahead and pop that open. So now for this game, let's say I'm playing Neverborn, which makes sense because they're the best. And then I'm going to go ahead and the first thing I'm going to do is pick my master. I think I'll play Lilith for this game. So I'm going to open up the Masters menu, pick Lilith off the list. You basically do the same thing. You click and drag, and I'm going to drop it right onto my sidebar. So again, I'm building my list in my sidebar. My opponent can't see what I'm choosing. So let's just grab a few more models. I'll grab the Cherub Totem, drag him down. Let's see, grab a Henchman, and we'll grab Barbaros. He's a good fit with the Lilith crew. Makes sense. And what else? Do I want anything else? How about a Terratot? So I'm going to go ahead and grab a Terratot off the objects list. And if I want to, instead of clicking and dragging multiple down, if I want to create multiple of them, what I can do is select my tot and then hit Control-C. And what it does is it creates just a duplicate of the model that I've got selected at the time. Now one thing I notice is that when you later move these over from your sidebar, it'll drop them right on top of each other and they'll get stuck together. So in order to avoid that, what I do is when I have the model in my sidebar and I make the copy of it, I just move it a little bit. You don't have to move it underneath or anything. You can move it anywhere you want as long as you move it a little bit. And then later when you drag them over to your sidebar, they don't get trapped together like that. So let's get rid of those ones that were stuck together, and we'll bring the rest of my crew over. Whoops. Let's just click and drag, highlight all 3 of these guys, and reveal the rest of my crew to my opponent. There we go. Now let's talk about how to choose and reveal your schemes. So now that I've shown my crew to my opponent and I've seen his crew, it's time for me to pick which schemes I actually want to play with and bring them out into the main area, so that he knows there's no funny business going on behind the scenes in my sideboard. I can lock it in for the game. So let's say in this game I want to use, I don't know, I'm not going to play Line in the Sand. I'll select Line in the Sand and Control D to delete. I'm not going to play Entourage or Protect Territory either. I'll delete both of those. And I am going to use Make Them Suffer and Bodyguard as my schemes this game. So the first thing I want to do is I want to make sure that that little unrevealed stamp is on them. You can do that by selecting it and hitting Control F to flip it over. Optionally, you can right click it and choose Flip or Hide, I think. But I use the hotkey, so Control F does it too. And finally, I'll drag them over into the play area. Because it has that little red unrevealed stamp on it, my opponent can't currently see which 2 I've chosen. Now let's just say for argument's sake that I wanted to reveal Bodyguard, which I would never do until the proper time, but I would go ahead and just click it hit Control F, and the little unrevealed stamp goes away off of the scheme, and that reveals it to my opponent. Finally, let's talk about loading your models with their wounds for the game, setting the soul stones at their starting number, and deploying your models. So I always recommend starting the game by loading your models with their wounds. It just makes it generally easier for both you and your opponent to see exactly what's going on without anybody doing any bookkeeping on either end, or him constantly asking you, how many wounds does that model have left? So what you do is you select your model, and the N and the B key on the keyboard are the hotkeys for taking any counter one tick up or one tick down. So I'm going to go ahead and load Lilith up with 10 wounds. I'm going to go to the Terratot and here hit N 4 times to load him with 4 wounds. And load the rest of these guys up. I think Barbaros has, let me check, was it 9? Yep, 9 wounds. So we'll load Barbaros up with 9 wounds. The next thing I'm going to do is very similar. Go to my Soulstone counter and just hit N until I've hit the total number of Soulstones I'm starting with. And then finally deploy. And of course you'd flip for deployment, but you'll deploy inside the darker colored circle. And as long as your models are completely within that darker circle, you're good to go. I'm all deployed. And there you have it. I'm ready to play. I just need the opponent to deploy his stuff. And we're ready to get down. Alright, if you found these videos helpful at all, check out Part 3, the final in the series. Unless the demand is insane and I have to make a Part 4. But for now, check out the final part, Part 3, on playing the game. See what I think are the tips and tricks and the general mechanics behind moving your models around and checking ranges and that sort of stuff. And as always, there's better people to ask with questions about this stuff, but if you'd like to, you can always reach out to me. My email address is dlesavoy@gmail.com, or you can find me on SoCal Malifaux. If you just post a question up there, people are very helpful. And of course, the other Facebook group, A Weird Place, also a very helpful place to get information. Until next time, thanks a lot, guys. I'll see you then.